On-farm economics, it's no secret we're heading into a downturn. What can you do about it, and what can you do with companies that maybe can help you through this downturn? That's the discussion in this episode of Cutting the Curve.
Welcome to XtremeAg's Cutting the Curve podcast, where real farmers share real insights and real results to help you improve your farming operation. And now, here's your host, Damian Mason.
Hey there, welcome to another fantastic episode of XtremeAg's Cutting the Curve. I've got a great one for you today because, let's face it, on-farm economics, it's a reality. We've just come off of 3 amazing years, 21, 22, 23, record on-farm income, record net farm income, and we're talking about a pretty big downturn, 40% roughly across the board off of the 2022 high. Any business that takes 40% of revenue off of the table is going to have to make some adjustments. What adjustments are you making? What adjustments are the guys at XtremeAg making? And more importantly, can companies help you through this that are your business partners? That's the topic today. Matt Miles, one of the founders of XtremeAg, I'm wearing the Miles Farm hat here, and Steve Acker from Concept AgriTek. We're talking about on-farm economics. Matt said, hey, I didn't come in here with a whole big pages of numbers, but I can tell you exactly what's happening. You had a big meeting yesterday. The governor of Arkansas and the secretary of agriculture of Arkansas were at your farm. Let's just lead off with that. What was the topic? I assume the reality of farm economics.
Well, yes, for sure. Governor Sanders had reached out to me a couple of weeks ago and said, "Hey, we see there's a problem," and she and Senator Bozeman, U.S. Senator Bozeman, he's in that does all the ag stuff with the Senate, and they just wanted to sit down and have a roundtable discussion with farmers about what was going on. And I told them, I said, you may hear a lot more than you want to hear. And they said, no, we're prepared. We know there's something going on. I think there's finally a spark to the administration. I say to the administration, to some of the administration of what's going on. And that's the scary part. Is the other part of the administration, I don't know that they even care, or if they do care, I don't know that they even understand what's going on. But these rural areas, have recognized this, and if you think about the United States in general, it's majority rural, Now you big cities, but then when you get outside of Chicago, Mr. Steve, it's all farm ground, and same thing about anywhere you go. So I think there's finally a little bit of spark that they're realizing, because it's not just going to be the farmer, it's going to domino down to everyone in these rural communities, school, everything else.
We talk a lot about, Steve Acker, the rural urban chasm. Last I looked, it's around 17% of the entire U.S. population lives in rural, but that encompasses more than 90% of the geography of the United States. So it's like 90+% of the geography of the United States only inhabits 15 to 17% of the population, and agriculture is critically important in much and almost most of those areas. You're a big city guy, meaning you have agricultural ties. You work for an agricultural company, but you spent 20 years with the CME in Chicago. You got a little different appreciation for it now. When you're on the floor, it's all just about moving products and buy, put, sell. Now it's a little different thing. You're working for an ag company. You're kind of out here you're working for a rural Missouri-based company. What are you seeing?
I love it, and just the people has been the best part of it. Just getting to be around a different group of people. But it's phenomenal to see as I drive from Chicago down to Missouri. Just the farmland. It was even interesting. We saw a lot of growth in April and March and April, and then the rains came in. I think we had 23 through the Midwest. There was 23 to 25 days of rain. You could pick a state in the Midwest. And I remember driving to Nashville for a hockey tournament for my kid. And we were driving off the interstate on back roads, looking at all the farmland, looking at different, areas where they planted. So they have that appreciation, for the commodity itself versus just, an electronic tick or a chart in the background, to see the production, to see the work that goes into it, to see the true challenges that the farmer has to deal with. I always joke, from a finance background, it's like, agriculture makes the airline business look easy. Like it's one season, high fixed cost debt, and you're waiting on revenue from the quality of the product and the yield to the price, and your margins are variable throughout the year. I mean, what a challenge.
It's always been a high capital investment, low margin business. And the difference is many businesses are that way. Commodity production are oligopolized to the point where there's only a few players. Copper, Freeport McMoran or something. You start naming these, these huge entities. They generally have investments. They have investors. They're publicly traded, whatever. So everyone seems to understand that we're going to have, billions of dollars invested to make a couple pennies, that kind of thing. The difference on the agriculture side is that it's not huge oligopolized players. It's guys like Matt Miles. So you're playing with a lot of money that generally makes very, very small returns. So in your discussion yesterday, Matt, granted, that's nice to have a senator, a secretary of agriculture, a governor there, but it doesn't change the economics. When you look down the road, 2024 is the first year of a downturn coming off of 3 record years. You're holding up probably a little better in the South than some regions. My understanding is the West specialty crop is getting hit harder because they're oversupplied and they even have more capital deployed. What's the takeaway from yesterday? And when you're talking about Arkansas agriculture economics?
Well, the biggest takeaway, of course, they've extended a farm bill, right? So we hadn't had a farm bill since 2018, and it was based on 2018 economy. Right. Everyone knows what's happened since 2018 between COVID and, everything else. So the whole dynamics of the agriculture industry is a total different, species than it was then. Well, they keep kicking this can down the road with an outdated farm bill. So the big issue up until this year has been, hey, we've got to have a farm bill that's secure, and gives us some type of light at the end of the tunnel.
Sure.
Well, during all this extending the farm bill deal, I mean, everyone's seen what commodity prices have done. They're down, 30-40%, some of them, from what they were. Well, you still got these high inputs, and then now you've got low prices. And there's always a fallacy. They love to pick on farmers' record income, record net income. A lot of the guys that will go out this year were not, they wasn't making that record net income. Prices were decent, but inputs were so high, and through the COVID deal and the supply that it looks like that was a really great time. My best year, believe it or not, was 2012, because that's when the drought was in the Midwest.
Yeah.
And it sucks as a farmer to have to almost wish someone does bad. The only way you're going to be successful is someone else in the country does bad.
Right.
We're talking about of the row crop side, vegetables don't affect me any. The big deal right now is immediate help, some kind of ad hoc payment that, if we get a hurricane coming in, they're going to have some ad hoc payments to help rebuild, from the hurricane, whether it's crops, whether it's houses, whatever. I mean, there's, you go on to loss of life, there's nothing like that. But this is a disaster too. I mean, it really is. It's hard to compare it with losing your home, maybe, or your life, but it's a disaster too. And there's going to have to be some immediate help. If I told you the amount of acres that's available to rent for me next year, it would almost make you want to puke. And then there's 2 sides to that. So there's the guy with low amount of equity that was already maybe in trouble or just barely getting by in the last 3 years, and then he gets slapped in the face. Or there's the 65-year-old farmer that says, why should I continue to fight this? I'm 65 years old. I'm very financially secure. Let me get out of it now. So those two are converging on each other. And then there's some of us in the middle that's got to try to figure out. And we can't absorb, what's happened in the last 10 years is the smaller farmers have went out, the unprofitable operations. The other farmers have had to swallow that up, because the land has to be farmed, or we starve to death. Well, now most of the farmers that's in business today have about taken all the acres they can take. Especially when you go to your bank and interest is 7%, you say, hey, I want to run another 7,000 acres. That, what are they going to say? So almost a squeeze play.
By the way, you said the word unprofitable and small. We're not in any way saying that small equals unprofitable, but what you're talking about is generally in your situation, if acres come available because somebody's against the financial ropes, a larger operation absorbs those acres, whether they buy or rent those acres or whatever. Is kind of to your point. I just want to make sure that the listener doesn't think that unprofitable and small go hand in hand, because that's not necessarily the case.
I'm going to say a small farmer right now is in better shape than a big farmer. What I'm saying is some of them are just tired of fighting the fight. Well, there's going to be a lot of big farmers go out of business too.
Sure. Well, you also pointed out about the 65, 70-year-old. It's something that if you've been around this game, Steve, and I want to get to you because you're an economics guy. I have seen this enough times in my life. The person that hangs on too long, you want to go and tell them in the year 2011, 12, when things were, amazing. Like, you thinking about getting out? Yeah, but things are too good. I'm like, that's why you should get out. And then they hang around and play the game for 3 more years into losing. It's like, well, you must have loved it enough that you just gave away $1 million of equity. Well, I didn't know. I'm like, well, a lot of people would have said it's time to get out. There's a real time to get out. Anyway, economics from your perspective, Steve, you're an economically minded guy, and this is kind of a different. Like I said, you're not on the trading floor. It's a different thing out here. What are you seeing?
Well, from the economic side, I mean, it is my daily crossword puzzle. So I love that one. Just following up on a few things Matt said. It was really interesting. It's going back to 2022 where, you had the crop prices explode after Russia invaded Ukraine. Crops are a function of the inputs that go into them. And if the inputs are going higher, then, it's like building a house. If lumber goes higher, the price of the house is going to go higher. If steel prices go up, they have to pass that through. What's really interesting there is like in what everybody thought, the farmer was just making tons of money because of higher revenue. Then that's the flaw of focusing on revenue. The focus should always be on profits. Revenue in that time period, margins didn't really expand that much. There was some operating leverage involved where you would see greater profitability through higher prices. But, that's where I think the myth of the farmer being profitable in 2022 because of the spike in input prices, that is the challenge of farming. That is managing the volatility of farming. And what's really interesting, there's a philosophy in economics called intermarket analysis. And it's a study of where interest rates, currencies, commodities, and equities, the movement, the relationship with them all together. And also try not to get too economic of, what the US dollar means to commodities. And what we saw in the last couple of years of raising interest rates to battle inflation. For the last 2 years, the correlation, if we look at grain prices coming down, interest rates were going up. The U.S. dollar was stronger. So post Bretton Woods and after World War II, the U.S. dollar became the reserve currency. Commodities are priced in dollars. So therefore, when the dollar is stronger, commodity prices come down. As interest rates, short-term rates, the Fed raised interest rates to battle inflation. Interest rates went up, commodity prices came down. That's extremely difficult, where we are in the cycle. Part of me is like, well, we have the dollar weakening, we have the Asian markets coming back, we have interest rates lowering, the yield curve is flattening. All those impacts are usually positive to the commodity sector because we see the dollar pulling back. So that's where, somewhere in here, what's interesting with all the bad news, there's a bottom that comes somewhere. That's where, and, I think we'll probably get into this later. It's like when there's not enough profit to produce, people pull back production. If supply goes down, demand, if there's less supply, there's higher prices. Are we looking at seeing anything there that, we might be bottoming in the grains? But to move to what Matt was saying, I think, what's interesting is the interest rates within the business and how that ate into the profitability. And this would be a great question for Matt as a producer to really kind of talk about that. That when your profit margins are low, what you're referring to is, large revenue, low profit margins. When companies have that, such as, like a copper company like Freeport-McMoRan, where they have they control their industry. Farmers don't have the ability to change prices, and you can't pass through the higher interest rates. That's why in this cycle, agriculture gets hit because you have prices going down because interest rates are going up. And when your margins are slim, interest rates eat into your net income in a leveraged business. So that's where, hopefully there's some hope coming as interest rates come down, dollar comes down, commodities, hopefully commodities find a bottom here. We've been talking about the inflationary pressures. You go into a community like Chicago, your politicians here are talking about like, hey, how the prices are so high at the stores and the inflationary pressures are, part of everybody's grocery bill. But then you go to the farming where we had deflationary pressures, prices are coming down and they're getting squeezed. So it's when you see two worlds come together that are disagreeing like that, something is about to change. So, that's that from an economic view. Didn't mean to get too into the economic side.
You got a little professorial there, Steve. You did get a little professorial. Let's go with, and by the way, then he said, this would be a good question for Matt. Did you not get the memo? I'm the question asker around here. Anyway. All right. Hey, let's go with the one of his points. He made a lot there, and he also gave a lot of contemplation, economic contemplation. Let's go with the big one that's staring every farmer in the face, the ones that are listening to this episode, interest rates.
Yes.
Okay. Sometimes we compare bad turns in the ag economy to the bad 80s. And, Steve, you were a baby in the 80s. Matt and I are old enough to remember the 80s farm crisis.
Yeah,
we're not there.
I do.
We're not there for a lot of reasons. And one of them is we're not obligating 18% interest rates. That was a reality. Right. Younger people in ag, to say they don't get it, Matt's son Lane is a good kid. He's a 30-year-old man. He's been back at the farm for 8 years now farming. He doesn't understand 18% interest rates because he's never had to pay them. And it's not any way cutting on him. It's not any way bashing. We're not there. But also, we did a doubling of interest rates.
Yes.
And that's what a lot of people, I just had this discussion with a banker, and somebody might say, oh, my operating loan went from 4% to 8%. That's a 4% increase. No, that's a 100% increase.
Yeah.
If money was fertilizer and it went from $10 to $20, that's a doubling. Interest rate going from 4% to 8% is not a 4% increase. It's a 100% increase because it's a doubling of the interest rate, and money is an input. So, Matt, when you look at the interest obligation, that's the reason that you're talking about some of these farms that are going to come available. They can't get the operating money. They could get the operating money. They can't obligate it. You're a former banker. You worked as 2 years in ag lender when you were starting out. Am I right?
Yes.
It's going to be the operating loans that keep these guys from being able to farm.
Yeah, it's a double-edged. I mean, you're getting hit from both sides. You've got, and I almost disagree. And I was a kid in the 80s, but I almost disagree with this not being as bad as the 80s because the inputs are 3 to 4 times higher than they were in the 80s. I mean, a tractor's, a new John Deere tractor, just an average tractor, 8R tractor is $400,000 now. In 1980, yes, interest rates were 18%, but when you go back and equate all that to today's economy, I don't know that was any worse then than it is now. And interest is just another shot, another bullet we're taking, in this whole thing. But it's a big deal. Like you said, it's 100% increase. Our tractors went from, costing us about probably $60 an hour to operate with interest to today, they're 84. And you just keep tagging that on. The sad part is, I get really pissed off because they're going up on this. You just say they're going up on this cotton picker. Okay. Mm-hmm. Well, their bolts are higher, their metal's higher, all the sheet metal they build the cabinets, everything that they're touching is also went up that high percentage. Mm-hmm. Plus they've got interest too. It's a perfect storm of a disaster.
So, Steve, let's just go with, there's really three words that begin with in interest rates, inflation, and inputs. And they're really, and cost of inputs, to Matt's point, and I'd have to get my actuarial chart out here, but does a $400,000 tractor now, is that the same as what we paid $40,000 for in 1984? I don't know. I mean, it is, but interest rates, inflation, and inputs, they all three are contributing to what's going to end up being a real tough time for farm economics. I think interest rates is the worst one, but Matt points out maybe it's inflation.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting in that, and I'll just touch on the interest rates because you were talking about, your operating line going from 4 to 8. That's 100% increase in your interest. in your interest expense. Well, what's interesting with that is like, a 400 basis point increase, or, interest rates going up 4%, is that hits your bottom line. If you're borrowing the same amount of capital, if your net profit margins are 10%, well, now you just lost 4%. That's a 40% decline in your profitability because of interest. And then think of agriculture as well, is when interest rates are going up, commodity prices are going down. So you're being squeezed on your revenue and you're being squeezed on your net profit margins. That's what we see. But now to move to, the comment about the inflationary aspects of equipment and everything we've seen there. What's been interesting in my lifetime of seeing it, and I remember the 80s, and just got to touch on that. What I appreciated so much about the 80s is, as Reagan came in the office, bonds peaked. He put an end to inflation. That was the last bear market we saw in bonds. Like, I was like 5 years old at the time. And that's where nobody has seen rising interest rates. We went through, late 90s led to a deflationary cycle of basically free money trying to create inflation. And now we got it. And now nobody knows what to do with it. But when you look at the equipment and the tractor, for example, I got to ride a cotton picker. There was a great guy in Arkansas, and not making it to the South that much. Got a ride on it. It was incredible to see the technology and the productivity that could come out of that machine versus, I asked a lot of questions of like, how has technology progressed? How has this machine added to your productivity within farming? And so that's where some of those prices might make sense if a machine at a higher value can do more. The inflationary pressures of that machine add to your productivity, it could be worth it. And I think that's what we've seen in farming and the technology that have come in. But yeah, it was a great story. I was riding the cotton picker and I was like, hey, I'm from Chicago. Do you mind if I get the tourist stuff out of the way? I just took a video. It was so cool to experience. But yeah, I mean, that's one aspect on, the productivity, battling inflation with that too, but also the impact of interest on net income.
All right, so let's go with that because, all right, Matt, the answer, of course, that Steve points out has always been economically, yeah, costs are up. Yeah, even on a real dollar basis, at $400,000 tractor versus in 1984, you could have bought a $40,000 tractor, let's say. I don't think it's quite that, but it might have been more than that. But the productivity gains make up for the inflation, or we should say surpass the productivity gain is greater than the inflation gain. And that's been the argument.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. And I think you're going to say, yeah, that was true to a point, not now, I think is what you're going to tell me. Like, I can't. And then I want you to tell me what your adjustment is going to be, because $1 million cotton picker, yeah, the productivity is there. But when cotton's at 69 cents or whatever the hell it is right now, probably not too far from that, I can't be productive enough.
Yeah, well, and to Mr. Steve's point, I see exactly what he's saying. I operate a cotton picker myself, and the things that picker will do today at 900,000 is a lot different than the basket picker, or even, you can go back further than that. The technology side, we're able to do, we're actually not able to harvest any more acres with that picker than we were, say, one from 10 years ago. But there's a lot of productivity, fuel savings, different things like that go along with it. I'm actually talking about just basically a round bale picker. The same first round bale picker that come out 10 years ago will harvest the same, with a high percentage of the same amount of acres. But also see what Mr. Steve's saying. I bought a brand new 8 series tractor in 2000, was 102,000. Today, that same tractor is between 300,000 and 400,000.
Yep.
Yes, it's a more productive, and I've got technology that goes with it. But is it 4 times the productivity? The productivity is lagging behind the increase in cost, I guess, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
We're having to absorb this land. Any farmer that's in business today is a great farmer, or he wouldn't still be here. I will say that. But he's had to absorb and do things differently. And now we're at a point where you've got to have that type of equipment to be able to get over that many acres in the narrow windows we have to get things done. If that makes sense.
It does make sense. So the point there, Steve, is, like I said, I was guessing that was going to be Matt's point. Generally, huge increases in prices. We always chalked it up to productivity made up more than the rise in the cost. And now we can say maybe not so much anymore. So I want to get to on-farm economics, adjustments that can be made because we are probably here for a while. Unless, to Matt's point, a bunch of these acres somehow end up not being farmed next year, which then would correct the supply issue because we're oversupplied and demand remaining constant, price would go up. I think that everybody on this call is going to say, yeah, those acres are going to get farmed because it usually never happens that things get so bad that acres don't get farmed. Even in the 80s, with the exception of CRP, every acre got farmed.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just to touch on that too, what's really interesting is the production in economic terms. If you can cover your variable price, fixed costs are viewed as kind of a sunk cost. You know, they're going to be there. Like you owe the payments on the tractor, you owe the payments on the land. They're going to be there. And that's where if you can't cover the variable costs that, hey, I'm going to put extra capital into this business, and that doesn't cover it, that's when you stop to produce. I don't think we're there yet because technology is the driver. And that's, you know, it's interesting, you know, this is what I love about working with the farmers and instead of just being in the markets, because you get to see the narrative behind what's driving the markets. And, you know, where we're at right now, where Matt was in economic terms, where Matt was describing is where marginal revenue equals marginal cost, that there's not a lot of value in trying to buy technology in a tractor because it's just, you know, the offset you get in revenue basically pays for the technology. But that I think is the challenge of the industry, and even kind of just, you know, plug a little bit what we're doing at Concept AgriTek. But as the industry as a whole, and as I drive back and forth to Missouri, I'm always listening to the conference calls of the majors, you know, Corteva, Nutrien, CF Industries, and hearing a message of technology. And that's where if we can produce higher yield, if there's a return on investment for $1 that goes in, the variable cost is $1, but the return on that is $3. That is the only way to survive in this industry. Now, I think more profitability comes back in as interest rates drop, because I think, you know, and I'm going to go out on a limb here and I'll explain this really slow. I'm a big believer in what's called economic value. And when you look at your return on your invested capital, and your invested capital is everything that you put into the farm, from your land to your tractor, to your combine, to the seeds, all the capital that goes in there, that minus your cost of capital. So that is your interest rates. It's the cost. It could be a cost of your equity that you're putting into the investment. That spread is your economic value that you derive from your farm. And what we've seen is return on invested capital is going down as net income goes down lately. Then your cost of capital is going higher through interest rates. So therefore, it's deteriorating the economic value that's created by the farm. So what do you do in that situation? Efficiencies, your return on assets, your efficiencies of everything you're using, everything you're putting in to the product. You have to drive more, and then be very efficient with your cost of capital, especially where interest rates are high, to drive economic value. That's the ticket for winning in this industry. And that's the ticket for anybody who's ever gone through these sort of struggles.
All right. I want to go through, by the way, I wrote down invested capital minus cost of capital equals economic value. I like it. I like economics. And so I have a degree in agricultural economics, for crying out loud. I haven't talked this much. I haven't geeked out this much on a Cutting the Curve Extreme Ag episode on agricultural economics for quite some time, maybe ever.
I love this stuff. So sorry if I'm going too far from it. So
Matt was a banker 30 years ago, and he thought, hell, I got out of this for a reason. All right, answer me this. He talked about efficiencies. That works to a point.
Yes.
At some point, you're about as efficient as you can get. What things are you on Miles Farms? Let's talk about strategies now. We've talked a lot about on-farm economics, where it is, why it's there, et cetera, policy. Maybe there's going to be some lifeline come from USDA. That's happened a lot. What are you doing? What adjustments are you making right now heading into 20? You're about done in 2024. You're ahead of us in the Midwest. You're down there in South Arkansas, so you're ahead of us. You're putting the wrap on 2024. What are you now thinking about adjustments you're going to make because of the on-farm economics?
But it's just like Mr. Steve said, you know, we've got to figure out how to do more with less, or do what we've been doing with less.
Yep.
Will create us to pay less interest. But I made some mistakes this year trying to cut costs. I honestly did, you know, cut fertilizer here, cut this out. you've got to be extremely careful, and Mr. Steve alluded to this with ROI, that you're not cutting something out that's actually making you money.
Yeah.
You know, they sell products that I'm going to use no matter what the price of the crop is, because I'm getting a return on it. Even when the crop's lower, I get a less return. We're going to have to be real careful not to knee jerk and say, well, I'm not doing this, I'm not doing that. You know, and then you go to second guessing. And I'll give you a prime example. You know, we do some tillage. And when we put out our poultry litter, which is our main source of phosphorus fertilizer, you know, we cover that, you know, we incorporate it in the soil. You've seen the text the other day, probably on the group text where I was asking Kelly, you know, in a no-till situation, you just sling it out there on the ground and just let it sit there. And, you know, they're a little concerned about that too. From a no-till situation, where's that manure going?
Yeah.
So we took a percentage of our farm and said, okay, we're not going to till this. We're just going to put the litter out, let it rain in, and hope all is well next spring. Then you get to second guess yourself. Okay, what if I lose 20% of that, or if it don't work as well? So
yeah, if you lose 20% of the nutrient value of the manure, then that more than makes up for sending one of your hired guys out there with tillage equipment to incorporate it. Yeah, because you're thinking, maybe I cut back. I don't have a hired guy per hourly rate. I don't have the wear on the tractor. I don't have the diesel expense. So you know, you can, it's the old thing. It's hard to cut expense yourself into prosperity, right? There's always that thing. You know, there's frugality, and then there's stupidity, because, like, well, at some point you still got to go out and do the farming.
the
I
things
appreciate that so much.
are, you know, like I said, if you're a farmer and you're still in business in today's world, you've done a pretty good job. Now, I do think sometimes we don't know all the money we spend, you know, and where's the waste? Where's the waste money being spent? You know, I would say you've really got to, if you can't look at your books and do your books like you should hire someone to do it. They'll pay for themselves.
Yep.
And a lot of times we get in the way of ourselves. You know, you take a farmer that's not real good at managing that side of his business. Well, he can hire a guy for 50 grand or 100 grand to do that. And he says, well, I can't afford that. But if it's costing him 200 grand because he's not getting it done,
Yep.
then there's an ROI on that guy.
Yep.
But man, we have cut, I mean, we're getting to the point where we've about cut all the fat off we can. And then we're still in this situation. Now, you can't knee jerk to the point that, well, this is a bad year, I'm going to quit. You know, the old farmer you're talking about stayed too long. You know, that keeps me up at night. You know, I'm not quite old enough to be looking at that, but I'm thinking, no, I've got a degree. Should I go to work for Concept AgriTek? You know,
Right.
just make a salary and
Yeah.
it all just snowballs on you. But you've got to look at a 10-year plan. You can't look at a 1-year, 2-year plan.
Mm.
You know, if you're building a set of grain bins, you don't need to look at what you need next year. You need to look at what you're going to need in the next 10 years. My hope is that if I stay the course and watch what I spend and make sure it's an ROI, that I can come out at the end of this thing.
What about, Steve, programs? Your company's doing it. I think more companies are going to probably follow your lead on there's got to be give somewhere, you know.
Absolutely.
And I'm not being mean, but a lot of agricultural suppliers padded the books pretty good when farm revenue was up because they knew the money was there. And so there was a lot of increase in some of the increase in prices was very justified. They're paying more for fuel. They're paying more for electricity. They're paying more for their insurances. God knows my farm insurance policy has doubled in 5 years. You know,
Yeah.
I get all that. But some of these agricultural supply companies are going to follow your lead and start making some adjustments because they'll have no choice. Am I right?
Yeah, they have to, and that's where, you know, I don't know if we want to get into, and I don't like the term program, because to me, program is a shell game. You know, program is like, you know, more enticing, you know, enticing the purchase by something that looks shiny or what appears to be a benefit, but might not really fully be a benefit. And to go, not the economic side, but more philosophical side, you know, the challenges that we face, and, you know, even what Matt's talking about now of cutting everything to the bone and being, what he's saying is driving efficiency, which I love. That going through challenging times, like I love I'm a big obstacles the way sort of guy. And when you think about it, the line is what stands in the way becomes the way, that it sharpens you, it makes you better, it makes you more efficient. And going through these times have allowed us to even think through these programs. I hate the word program, worked a year on this with a group of attorneys and trying to get everything together just to help. To take practices that are out there in other industries and larger companies to be able to remove volatility, increase profit for the farmer. And I'm a big believer in if we put our customer first, or just in life, like what I try and teach my boys, if you put somebody else first, if you create the canvas for their value, for their art, that is always a win. Always bring more to the table than you take. And that's been the heart of what we've tried to do in helping the situation, but most importantly, in bettering the farmer, not helping, but bettering.
Our company's approaching you, Matt, and saying, we realize 2025 is going to get skinny, 2024 is skinny. Are they doing price reductions? Are they just doing incentives, pay early, and you save 25%? What are you seeing?
It's not as much as you would think. I mean, Concept has kind of took the first step in my operation. They're the first ones to come to the table with any kind of, I don't know if you call it relief, but a little bit better.
Don't call it a program. That pisses Steve off. He said twice he doesn't like the word program.
It's strategy.
By the way, he's also sitting. He's sitting there, and if you're listening to this while you're driving your tractor or truck, he's sitting there with a little pad of paper. I almost think he's been writing down what Matt and I are saying. So I appreciate that.
Taking notes.
Well, and what we've seen so far mostly is trying to lower the interest rate. Like they'll come out with a, 0 interest to December type deal. If you buy this product, that's kind of been the incentive we've seen so far. I did get some information yesterday. There's going to be a few advancements on the 25 model CP 770 cotton picker. And I don't think Deere's going to increase the cost. And that's the first time. And you heard me say that. You've never seen a year when they don't increase the cost, especially if they're adding something to it.
Yep.
I think the companies are starting to recognize the problem is if something don't happen really quick,
yep,
these bankers are not going to be able to
renew.
I mean, it's an immediate. We need that's what we said to the governor. And there's a lot of outside factors. So there was a guy made a statement in here and don't 100%, hold me to these numbers, but I think he said Brazil has increased their cotton production by 3 times. Okay. All right. These companies don't make them pay tech fee costs. The different costs that we get in America. They're like, if you go to Brazil, you can see the whole country's farmland. So, that's cash cow. They can produce cotton at 65 cents and make money, yep, and they're tripling their production. What's that going to do to U.S. cotton? It's coming from every different direction.
Right. And that's a topic for another episode about the Brazil situation. But okay, about the incentives or programs or discounts or whatever. Concept AgriTek has variable pricing, so you're going to do a thing, and that's just based on seasonality, or is it based on how are you doing it?
So variable pricing, we're starting it as an early pay program, okay, and it is based on and I'll cover the efficiencies of what it creates for Concept and how we're able to do it. But just to describe it a little bit, it's what we saw is in this sort of a market, the farmer has to invest in their crop. Their only hope is actually to drive yields higher or lower costs. But like if you start giving up on that, and that's what we talked about, that cost cutting and being in the CFO role at Concept AgriTek, it's always interesting that being a finance person, people think that cutting cost is going to be my mission. And it's like, no, it's like, don't cut $1 don't save $1 to lose 5, like shoot for that yield. Shoot for that return. And that's what we're trying to encourage or be there as a partner to help the farmer through that. And that's what variable price is, that when you look at all of your costs being fixed, and from the minute that somebody buys our fertilizer, it's fixed. And what we're doing is giving a rebate that, like on any grain that the farmer is choosing to grow, that there's a rebate right now through November. It's a 1.5 multiplier. After November 15th, it's a 1-to-1. So if you're a corn grower, corn goes down 1%, we match that by 1.5% rebate at the end of the season. And it's a check. It's not a credit. We're not holding on anybody's money. So if it goes down 10%, we're writing a 15% check. If it goes down 20%, we're doing 30. So that's where
for the cost of the input. For the cost of the input. So if Matt's production, so you're going to say, granted, you're doing it on the input bought. If Matt buys 200,000, 100,000, let's use square numbers. Use $100,000 of Concept AgriTek stuff today, and by next year, corn is down 8%. You're going to give him back $8,000 of that $100,000. 8%. You're doing a percentage match on product.
Correct. Yeah, but it's a 1.5 multiplier right now. So, in this year, on that $100,000, we'd be writing through $30,000 checks back. Okay. And that's, in how we're able to do that is using the insurance of the market. So we look at variable price. The benefits of it are twofold. That it's a protection for the farmer if their crop values decrease, that if we're decreasing our input prices, and we'll use a quick example. We had this incredible farmer out of Arkansas increase his yield 41%.
You keep talking about these incredible farmers out of Arkansas. We're talking to an incredible farmer out of Arkansas.
Matt probably knows him. So the guy increases his yield by 41% on soybeans, and his revenue went up 9% because beans went from 13 to 10. And it's like, you did all this work and you grew revenue 10%. He put about $46 per acre into the crop, which gave him an ROI. He was just a little bit north of 2 on his ROI on the input costs. But with variable price, we would have taken his ROI to about 5, because we would have dropped the $46 an acre down to like the high 20s, the low 30s. And that's the partnership side of saying, hey, we're with you on this. We have the ability with the size of our company to insure this. We don't have the margins in the product to do this. We have the ability to go get insurance, and we're paying for that insurance on behalf of the farmer.
So by the way, do you participate on the upside also? So if commodity prices go up by 10%, are you going to send him a bill and say you owe us more for that?
No, that's the gift actually to the farmer as well. So that's the hidden gem in variable price.
All right.
And it's really important. I'll say this real quick. They are locked to our price sheet the minute that they enter the contract, the minute that they prepay. Right. So we've never seen crop prices go up or input prices aren't going up with it. So if crop prices go up, that's all gravy to them, and they have lower input prices because we were able to lock in the raws at an earlier date. So it's a hedge on both sides for them.
Matt, you going to see more of this?
Well, I sure hope so. I sure hope we see. This is going to sound. Maybe I shouldn't say what I was going to say, but the people that make money off us, it feels good to know that they're figuring that out, that we're in trouble and that we need help. And Mr. Steve, tell me if I'm wrong, but I don't want you to write me a check, right? I mean, if when I look at this program, with Reed, I told him, I said, I don't want you to have to write me a check. That means prices have increased, and I've gotten my money out of the market. About it decreased and had to get a check from you. I am thinking about that correctly, right?
It's exactly. It's stabilization in the downside, and it's kind of like it's like home insurance. Like I don't want to write the check because your house burnt down, but we're there. It's a safety net below you. The best situation in that is the commodity prices did go higher, and you locked in your inputs at a lower rate. Therefore, you're increasing your margins. And I'll mention this from concept side. What's so attractive there is to lock in the raw materials. That you have a business where you look at capacity within the business, and we're so busy for 3 months out of the year, we're over capacity, and then it smooths out. It's kind of like a bell curve. And where we can utilize our capacity in those months, knowing the orders that we have. And that there's operational savings in there that allow us to pay for the insurance. And then, also on the finance side with this, we'll actually finance the variable price program at 0% interest to January of 2026. We've worked with partners on that because that goes back to that economic value model. If we're able to increase your profitability, that your return on your invested capital goes up and your cost of capital goes down, we're allowing you to create economic value. And that's where to bring those strategies to the table to simply help is, that's how we're going to grow our business. It's a lot easier to keep, the best form of customer retention is drive profitability and keep your customer in business than going out and finding another customer. And that is a long-term situation that is much better than, hey, that didn't work for you, on to the next guy.
Matt, get me out of here. On-farm economics, we've not painted a very rosy picture, but also we're pretty honest here. I mean, if we say that XtremeAg is here to help our farmer followers, well, what are we supposed to do? Tell them everything's going to be just okay and don't worry about it? I don't think that's a strategy for success. Hope is not a strategy, right?
That's exactly right. Hope will get you in trouble. And we have come accustomed to the fact in the last century that, well, somebody's going to take care of the farmer because we got to eat. I'm not sure that is in a person's mind today. That's not, we're a national security. We're producing what we produce is national security. And I don't know that, I think there's going to be a realization at some point in time, that, hey, we've got to do something. And I applaud Concept for being one of the ones that's took the first step in trying to help protect the farmer. Because if we go out of business, who are they going to sell to? They know that. We know that.
Everybody knows that. All right. I think we're going to leave it right there. His name's Steve Acker. He's with Concept AgriTek, one of our business partners here. If you want to learn more about the variable price initiative, because we're not going to say the word program, where do they go, Steve?
We actually literally just launched this. So we're going to have some information coming out about it. I've had many conversations with our district sales managers. They're all really well versed in it. On social media, I believe in the next couple of days, we're going to be launching some material on it.
In the website.
Yeah.
Concept AgriTek, tech with a K. Concept AgriTek with a K. Go and check it out, and then they'll be seeing more about this. By the time this episode releases, it should be probably up on their site, and they'll know more about it. His name's Steve Acker, joined by the amazing farmer out of Arkansas, Matt Miles, and me. Thanks for being here. I know it's a long episode, but it's an important episode because we're talking about your legacy, and your farm and your lifestyle only happens if you stay around to fight another day. And that's going to come down to the economics on your farm. And that's why we covered this in such depth and breadth. We'll be doing more of it as things go on. Check out all the hundreds of episodes at XtremeAg.farm. And also this entire library of free videos of guys like me and Matt are out in the field day shooting, also at events like Commodity Classic. And then also at the XtremeAg.farm, you'll find a whole library of Cutting the Curve episodes. So until next time, thanks for being here. I'm Damian Mason with XtremeAg's Cutting the Curve.
That's a wrap for this episode of Cutting the Curve. Make sure to check out XtremeAg.farm for more great content to help you squeeze more profit out of your farming operation.